All right, good evening. Welcome to another broadcast. It is Saturday, March the 8th, 2025. We'll be starting here in, give it about a little over a minute and a half. We'll be starting. We're just going to give people time to get on. We'll have a very interesting discussion this evening. So glad that you can join us, even if you're watching on the the post-record. Really glad that you're here as well. So in the meantime, just sit back and then we're just giving people time to get on. All right, I think we're getting ready to start. Thank you so much for tuning in. For those in the chat, I got Tempest Tate in the house and Jennifer Young, and I know I got some other people there as well. So glad that you guys can join us for this special broadcast. And all of them, as far as I'm concerned, are special because you are here, and we really appreciate it. Not because of me, but because you're here, and we're so glad that you can join us this Saturday. Today was a beautiful day out here in Arizona. Oh my gosh, it was nice. I mean, I looked up in the sky. I didn't see, it didn't look like a cat scratched it. I mean, there was no chemtrail stuff going on, at least what I can see. Puffy blue sky. I mean, puffy cloud, white clouds, blue skies, wide blue skies. That's the thing I love about out here. The sky just seemed like it just goes forever. And then we just happened to, because the last couple of days it's been, it was actually raining. Like off and on, a little bit raining. And, we don't get too much rain down here being that this is the desert, but, it's seasonal, at times we'll get it. And this is the time for it to come. And, but it's the last couple of days, it was cloudy. It was just a little overcast, just a little bit. And so where we are, I mean, pretty much if you're in the Phoenix area, you're going to see mountains because mountains are pretty much everywhere around here. And, but where we are, you can see them. And, and today my daughter and I were out and she was like, oh, look, you can see the snow. I was like, what? And yeah, you can see the mountains and the snow on top of the mountains because, it rains at this level. We went to 50 degrees, again, what was it, like a week or so ago? We were like in the 80s. We go from the 80s to the 50s. And, but yeah, but see, if it's 50 degrees here, when you get to the top of those mountains, it's going to be much, much colder. So when it rains here for us, is actually snow at that altitude. So when you look at the mountains, it's just such a beautiful sight. And the temperature was just perfect temperature today. And it was just a wonderful day. And I was just, man, it was so nice. I even jumped on my son's motorcycle and I was riding around in the area, man. It was just not, I didn't even have a helmet on. Oops. I said, I can't ride. I can't put your helmet on, man. And I'm not going fast. I'm like local roads, that kind of thing. And, I wouldn't go on the highway like that. That was just me being, I just wanted to jump on. I wanted to get as much of that fresh air and sunlight as I could. But, it was just, other than that, it was just such a wonderful, wonderful day. And I hope your day was great too. Even if you just didn't do anything, maybe you just sat down and just rested, hey, that's a great day too. So anyway, I'm glad that you guys can join us and welcome again to another broadcast. You saw that post I did yesterday. I said, man, I was going to, go live, but I was kind of looking at what's going on, and some of the stories that was on my timeline. And, it's just some things I guess you do need to talk about some of those things, but it just after a while just seems so circular. And I think by the time we're finished with this broadcast, I think you'll understand a little bit where I'm coming from on that, you know? And so it's just some things, it ain't moving anything. You know what I mean? We're just echoing, you know? And so I just said, you know what? Am I going to do that? Or am I going to work on this other project that kind of just happened? And this project I'm talking about, and I mentioned this in the post too, I told y'all I have been for some time really focused on, you know, really looking at South Africa because, you know, once again, that's coming up now, especially with, you know, with what's going on with, you know, with their changing of the rules that's going on, where they're aggressively saying that, hey, pronouncing we're going after this farmland. And even though they're saying, you know, what you hear a lot of is white farmers, they're actually going after black farmers too. So we're not getting the whole story. So, you know, as someone who grew up in a time where I actually saw Nelson Mandela come out of the prison, and, you know, I also witnessed on television the long lines of people, you know, voting for him as the first black president, you know, of that country and all of that. And to see where South Africa is now, you know, there's a lot of disappointment, to say the least. You know, I'm as an outsider, of course, but, you know, as someone for the longest who really held on to Pan-Africanism, you know what I mean? This idea that we're all one people. It is true to a measure, but you know, there's, you know, when you look at where South Africa is today, it doesn't match what many of us were hoping that it would be. And a lot of times it's very easy for us to sit back and to simply put all the blame on it's white people, it was colonialism, and that's it. And so I wanted to dig in because I knew that's a given. Colonialism did play a role, not just in South Africa, but, you know, in just about all of these African countries for that matter. And so, you know, of course that is the case, but what else? Is that the only thing that is through this entire continent haywire, or is there more things we need to know? And so what I did was, I told you I've just been really doing a lot of things on, you know, between ChatGPT, I've been on Grok, I've been on other things, and just really beginning to put wheels on so many of these ideas that I've had, things or projects that I've been really wanting to work on. And it just helps out tremendously. It's been helping me out tremendously. I feel like now I'm really moving at light speed now on some of these things. And so as it pertains to what we're talking about tonight, I wanted to put together a deep research project that would really go through the history of South Africa, starting all the way back before the Europeans came. What was the conditions like? What was the climate like? You know, what tribes were there? What people were there? The whole nine. And then when the Europeans came, and then when they came, and what changes took place as a result of them being there, you know, leading up to apartheid and then post-apartheid. And, you know, I want to look at educational comparisons between them and other nations of similar size. You know, HIV, AIDS, what's the root cause of that? It's a whole lot of things that we're going to touch on in this broadcast. And so anyway, and we're going to look at those notes. And so that's what I did. I was working on that, and you should see my prompt. My prompt was like I would probably say maybe a page and a half, because there were so many areas I wanted to touch on and to get accurate information on. And so I did it. It came out. I was like, wow. I mean, there was some things I didn't really know. And so I'm reading over this, and then about a day. And then the following day I'm in the car, and I was just thinking, I said, I want to do a video on this, because I really wanted to do a video on this on Friday. But like I said, again, I would just focus on that. just want to really take time to really absorb some of these things that I'm just finding out. And so I had this thought. I said, well, maybe I should what if I just print it out, make it into a PDF, and then just make it available for everybody so that they can look at the notes too, And so I thought about that, and I said, yeah, I could do that. And I kept thinking, I said, what if I do a book? What if I make it into a book? And so I was like, let me see if I can do that. And yeah, it was, I was able to I was playing around with some things to see if it could format it into a book form, and do that. And, the tool that I was using, it was good. It was good. It was actually doing a pretty good job with it. But I didn't want to do that. It was adding, the tool isn't, there's something with, there's certain levels of ChatGPT. Like I just got the regular level, like the premium $20 level. But the higher you go, it allows you to process more and more information. I'm just being very general. And this one clearly hit his limit because I noticed it started repeating things. And I was like, no, okay, so we're not going to do that. So anyway, long story short, what I'm going to end up doing is I got to format it. And I'm just going to put it in like a PDF form and then make it into a short book and make it available to y'all. So that should be done maybe Monday or Tuesday latest. And I'll put a link on the community page where you can download it and look at it. I found it to be very helpful. And what I did was, it's not just sitting there telling you, okay, this is what happened, that's it. I was very specific. I said on a lot of things. Like I said, listen, for every page, I want footnotes. So if you're going to be referencing the works of other people, make sure you provide the footnotes. And then at the end, of course, I said, make a huge bibliography, because I want to make sure that, of course, all of those references are mentioned in the back, but also any additional information that would help the reader to further along their knowledge on this whole topic here. And so, yeah, it did all of that. And I just have to format it. And, I'm just going to do it, just my old fashioned way, and just do that for you and put it together, because I think it's very important for us to understand that what we're going to be talking about tonight. It's going to help us to understand not just so much what's going over there. We're starting at South Africa, but you're going to see as we go on in this discussion tonight how it connects to us here, as Black Americans. But I think it's applicable to pretty much a lot of Black people wherever we are. You know what I mean? So anyway, so that's where we're going to go, this evening. That's what we're going to talk about. So it's been awesome. Anyway, so before we start here, just real quick, just a friendly reminder again, if this is your first time, welcome as always. And just know we do have a store called Sabatree, sabatree.com. Make sure you check it out. We'll be changing the banner, so I'll probably be working on that tonight. We'll have a brand new, beautiful banner we're going to put up here, and I'm going to try to do that once a week. Check out the website. We have all kind of wonderful things here, herbs, wellness stuff, anything from powders to teas to creams. We even have a whole section of copper jewelry, tinctures, seasonings, even food seasonings. We have capsules, sea moss, bladderwrack, and burdock root capsules. If you're just wanting sea moss itself, we got sea moss as well. For those of you who deal with pain, we got things for that as well. Turmeric is wonderful for that. Even headaches and stuff like that. Turmeric, we have turmeric capsules. These are, we call it turmeric 50-50 pack capsules. Reason why we call it that is because it has turmeric, of course. And then the other part is not just pepper, it's 50-50 pepper. And our 50-50 pepper is 50% pepper, the other 50% black seed. So I don't know of anybody that's selling that in the market, but we developed that here, and that's our thing. And that's what we're putting out there. And so you're getting a 1-2-3 punch when you're taking our turmeric capsules. And then we got all kinds of other goodies here as well, for bitters to just all kinds of stuff. Let's see. Yeah, the teas and all that. So make sure you check it out. The website again is sabatree.com. And then, of course, as I mentioned in our other broadcast here, if you have any questions regarding herbs in general, anything, just any question, if you need help putting together a meal list, a meal plan or whatever, you want to make sure you go here to Baba Herb Assistant. Okay. This is it right here. Not what's in the corner. This is our store assistant. We call her Ronnie, and she's going to help you with anything within the store. But if we don't, but there are going to be some things we don't carry, and you just have some general questions about what's good for high blood pressure, what's good for hair growth, what's good for vision or whatever. And Baba Herb is going to help you out with that. Okay. So make sure you check that out as well. It literally will tell you just about anything. Local restaurants. It'll tell you just about anything as it pertains to natural health and wellness. Okay. So check that out too when you get a chance. The website again is sambatree.com. All right. So again, big shout out to everybody that's in the chat, and so glad to have each and every one of you here. So tonight we're going to get right into it. This topic that we're going to talk about here, we're talking about, I have been, as many of you, we've been hearing a lot about what's going on in South Africa, especially as of late with Trump, basically saying he's cutting all the funding, that is going to that country. And primarily the reason is because of the fact of their recent laws. Well, these laws have been in place for a long time, but now they're really turning up the heat on it, where they're really targeting white South Africans. It's black South Africans now are saying, listen, we tired of looking at y'all. We tired of the fact that y'all own most of the land here. We're done with that. Now we're going to kick you out. And it's not just that. This is not just a one-time thing. Okay. This isn't just recently happened. This has been going on since the days of Mandela. When Mandela became president, the ANC was ruling, and like they are now, they basically flipped the script when it comes to apartheid laws. The apartheid laws were mainly laws that, basically were very oppressive to black folks, right? Think of Jim Crow. But when black folks took over, black South Africans took over, they kind of flipped the script, and now you have a ton of oppressive laws that target white South Africans. Now, some of you listening, you may say, well, what's wrong with that? After all they did to black people there, they need to do something back to them, and, you're not completely wrong on that, but we have to look at perspective. We have to look at history. We got to look at a lot of things here and really ask ourselves at the end of it, are these policies moving South Africa forward, particularly black South Africans? So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take a jaunt through history of South Africa, and we're going to take a look at how did South Africa end up where it is today. And then towards the end, we're going to look at at the end of that part, we're going to look at where South Africa, if it continues on its current trajectory, what would it look like in 30 years? Okay. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how what's going on in South Africa relates to us here, black folks here in America. Now, I know we're going to have some people that say, ain't got nothing to do with Africa. That's them and all this other stuff. You listen, if that's going to be your big hang up, then you might as well just go ahead and move on to the next video. It's fine. Okay. But anyway, if you look at us genetically, yes, most black Americans have a genetic connection to Bantus. All right. Most, not all, but most have a genetic connection to Bantus, who make up a pretty significant percentage of black folks that you will find in the central and southern regions of the continent of Africa. Okay. And that's just a matter of fact. Okay. And that's not something you could try to run from it. You could try to escape from it, but it is what it is. Now, has there been a lot of, distance and time put between us here in America, in the Americas, versus those on the continent? Yeah, absolutely. But it doesn't erase genetics. It just doesn't. Okay. So that's the perspective that we're coming from here. Okay, so that's what we're going to start here. All right, so without further ado, what I'm going to do is let me pull up this, what I have up here. I'm going to bring it up on the screen here. All right. It's a lot, okay? If you read through it, if we were to read through this straightforward, we'll be here half the night. So I'm going to do my utmost and my best to kind of hit it, the highlights of it. And then, like I said, I'm going to make it available for everybody for you to download and read on your own time, probably Monday or Tuesday late. Okay. All right. So let's go. Let me go back here and we're just going to begin here. So first things first, let's just say this. When it comes to, if you notice the title of our video, we're talking about tribalism. All right. Tribalism. When you look at just mankind, period, you're going to see that tribalism is something that it just impacts it. You're going to find it in every culture all over the world. Okay. It's not, tribalism isn't something that's just black folks or people from Africa. Tribalism is just something that you're just going to see, where you got one group against the other group. Okay. And you're going to find this literally all over the place. You just are. When you look at, for example, when we're looking at Europe, there's all kinds of tribal kind of wars that have happened over the years, going all the way back to BCE. You got the Romans and the Germanic tribes. Then you had the Romans going against, some of these other groups. The Romans, they were going against everybody. The tribe, the prominent tribe in that day was the Romans, and they were the Romans against everybody. Then you had the Visigoths, the German versus the Romans again. That was the Gothic War. You had Germans again going against everybody. Then you had the Romans going against the British, and then it goes on and on. The Slavic wars, you had that. Hungarian, you had that. It just goes on and on and on and on and on when it comes to these tribal type based wars that was happening all over just Europe, right? But it doesn't stop there. So also in Africa, you will find that there were a ton of tribal wars that were going on even before the Europeans touched ground on there. Okay, so Bantus, when they were migrating from up in the northern region going towards the south, there was a lot of battles and stuff that was taking place as they were doing their migration from the north regions to the south. Okay. You also had the Nubians against the Cushites. You had the Axumites expansion wars. You had that going on. You had the San people versus the Nguni. You had that Ghana Empire tribal wars. That was a Sanike, tribes of the Ghana Empire fighting against the Berbers and the Soso. It goes on and on and on. The Zulus versus I'm gonna say what the click Osa. That goes on. The Ashanti Fante wars. It goes on and on and on. So we see this tribal mindset that's just baked in, period. And what's some other example? And so you see it over here. When the Europeans came here to the Americas, when they came here, they just assumed that, okay, this is our land. That's it. We're going to take over. And so there was a series of wars between the Europeans and the natives that were here, and what was the fight usually over? Land, right? Land, access to resources, that kind of thing. As we jump in later on in this discussion, we're going to point out that this mindset of tribalism, it's still very prevalent to this day, and so that's what we're going to touch on that in a moment. But anyway, let me switch up here and just kind of go briefly, as much as I can, over this, what ChatGPT gave us on, what we're talking about here on the history of what was going on in South Africa and what has led to apartheid and beyond. So the title of that this book or whatever that I'm going to give to y'all is History of South Africa from Ancient Civilizations to Apartheid and Beyond. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to read some of this just to get started, and then I can kind of tell you, okay, all right, I'm going to skip some of this stuff here, okay? So let's go. So the territory of modern South Africa has been inhabited for hundreds of thousands of years. Early human ancestors dwelled there. Significant fossils finds in places like the cradle of humankind, and that's the Sterkfontein caves, attest to hominid presence from roughly 2.3 million years ago. By 100,000 years ago, fully modern humans, Homo sapiens, lived among the southern coast, leaving behind some of the world's oldest art and tools. The original indigenous peoples were the San, or the Bushmen, and the Khoikhoi, together known as the Khoisan, who were hunter-gatherers and pastoralists, respectively. They left a rich legacy of rock paintings and deep knowledge of the land. And now I'm going to skip. All right. Adam's calendar, we've talked about this before. South Africa may also hold traces of far more ancient human-made structures. A site known as Adam's calendar is a stone circle arrangement that some researchers controversially claim over 75,000 years old, which would make it one of the most oldest human-built structures on Earth. We'll skip on here. European arrival and early colonization. The first Europeans to reach southern Africa were the Portuguese in the late 15th century. And Bartolomeu Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope in 1488, and Vasco da Gama sailed past in 1497 on his way to India. These Portuguese explorers did not settle permanently, but made contact with the coastal Khoisan people. It wasn't until the 17th century that Europeans established a colony. Established a colony. In 1652, the Dutch East India Company set up a refreshment station at Table Bay, the Cape of Good Hope, under Jean van Riebeeck. The initial purpose was to provision the Dutch East India Company ships on the long journey to Asia. This outpost soon grew into a colony as Dutch farmers, or the Boers, and French Huguenot refugees were encouraged to settle and cultivate the land. They encountered the Khoikhoi, leading to competition for grazing land. The introduction of European farming practices and imported diseases devastated some indigenous communities. The Dutch also imported enslaved people from East Africa, Madagascar, and East Indies to work on farms, laying the foundations of South Africa's multiracial society, with a Cape-colored population arising from mixed ancestry of European, Asian, and African people. So let's stop there for a second. Make sure we're all following and tracking together. So there were already people here. So when these Europeans, before they even came here, they were already people in South Africa. I listened to some of these white South Africans. They try to make it seem as if as they were fleeing from Europe or whatever, they came here and they just saw open land. It was like, oh, we're just going to take it. Again, it's this whole, what's the mindset, manifest destiny mindset that you'll find Europeans practicing this literally all over. They'll just go wherever they want to go, and they just see some land and they say, we're just going to take it. That's it. We're just going to claim it, and that's it. And no matter who's there, we're just going to wipe you out. Europeans they do this on a world scale. All right. They have done this and continue to do this on a world scale. We're going to just take this land, whatever it is. It's ours because God told us it's our land. And so, of course, there were people there. And when these Europeans came here, you saw that, they immediately brought in slavery. They brought in these Africans from East Africa up the coast and start bringing them down as slaves to work on their farms and stuff like that. Okay. And not only that, not only did they bring their version of farming, but they also brought sickness and disease. All right. So they even brought that stuff. And so it's just, so we have to keep that in mind. So when, like I said again, so to recap, Europeans, when they came there, there were already Africans there. So let's not even go there with they came there and it was just a barren land and it was nothing there. That's not true at all. At least historically it isn't. Yeah, someone said, didn't black people populate the earth before 1492? Polynesian people say they came from Africa, but no claim. Yeah, black people were here. Yeah, that's not even a debate. I mean, yes, absolutely. What's funny though is, as I was reading this stuff, I said, it's funny when I listen to some white people, they tell black people to go back to Africa. But yeah, we go back to Africa, but guess what we're going to see? You. I mean, it's just funny. But anyway, let's continue. During the 18th century, Dutch Cape colony expanded, often clashing with indigenous groups. Here come the wars now. As Boer farmers spread eastward, they fought the Khoikhoi in a series of skirmishes and drove many San into more remote areas. By the late 1700s, they had met Bantu-speaking groups moving southwards, notably, I'm going to say it with the click now, forgive me now, the Xhosa, along with eastern frontier of the Cape. This resulted in the protracted Cape Xhosa frontier wars, also called Kafir wars, that raged intermittently from about 1779 to 1879. These conflicts were triggered by competition over land and cattle. Meanwhile, in the interior, powerful African polities were forming, such as the Zulu kingdom under Shaka Zulu in the early 19th century and the Soto Twana states. So yeah, it's that so this is what happened, so in the meantime you had, while on one hand you got the white people pressing these blacks that were already there towards the center of the of the country. But in the meantime, you had these other African tribes as well, again, holding on to their tribalism, like, oh, what the heck is going on here? So there's no mindset of we're all black and we're all on a one accord and we're all on the same page. No, they still were holding on to their tribal mindset. You understand what I'm saying? Daniel, I don't know. You need to chill. I don't know what you're saying. Y'all love Anglicized history. When I hear someone tell the truth about blacks worldwide, where did I say that wasn't the case? My advice to you is to chill and to listen, okay? Because everything you're saying here, I'm not denying. Okay, today we're talking about South Africa. You're coming here talking about Polynesian. I ain't talking about the Polynesians. We're focused on South Africa for now. All right. You want to talk about the Polynesians? Come back on Polynesian night. All right. But we're not talking about them. All right. So let's go. So I'm not looking for a debate on that. We're reading history here. All right. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay. So let's move on here. So this will continue to talk about later on. It's talking about the British, because now you got the British came in later on where all this is going on. Now you got the British coming in on top of this. And the British Empire, they came in and they started fighting with the Boers and all of that were already here. I'm just, like I said, I'm skipping this because like I said, again, I'm going to print this. I'm going to make this into a PDF so that you can read it all yourself and then you can follow along on your own time. All right. British rule brought significant changes: the abolition of slavery in 1834, the arrival of British settlers, 1820 settlers in the Eastern Cape, and a new Anglophone cultural influence. Tensions grew between the British administration and the Dutch Boer population, particularly over issues like language rights and the ending of slavery, which the Boers resented because it disrupted their labor system. So the Boers wanted slavery to continue. Whereas the British, they came in, whatever their reasons were, they said, we're done with slavery. We're going to outlaw it. We hereby, now that we're here, we're outlawing it, period. We're not doing the slavery thing anymore. All right. And like I said, that's a whole separate video in of itself as to the whys behind that, right? It wasn't because all of a sudden they just fell in love with black folks. There was some other reasons behind that. But like I said, again, we're not going to get into that now. All right. And so anyway, so the Boers and the British, they were going after each other. And still to this day, there's still a lot of friction between those two groups, right? Tensions grew between the British administration and the Dutch Boer population, particularly over issues like land. Okay, we already talked about that. These tensions prompted the Great Trek, and that's 1830 to 1840s, into which thousands of Boer families migrated north and northeast to escape British rule. The Voortrekkers ventured beyond the Orange and Vaal rivers, fighting battles along the way, notably against the Zulu. So as they were being pressed by the British into the further inland, they were being met by the Zulus. The Zulus like, hold on now, first the Bantu, now y'all coming? No, we ain't doing this. And so the Boers were fighting them too. And the Voortrekkers established their own Boer Republic, the South African Republic, and the Orange Free States in the 1850s, seeking independence to practice their farming lifestyle and conservative social order. So basically, they wanted a place where they continue to do their farming by using slavery. Okay? So when people, again, so these white farmers, as I'm talking tonight, that you're going to notice later on, there might be some things I may say where I'm not necessarily agreeing with them. I'm looking at a much bigger picture, okay? But make no mistake about it, this part of their history of South Africa, particularly when we're talking about these white South Africans, this cannot be forgotten. Okay, so that's why I want to take the time to cover this so that we know together that, yeah, this is what was going on. You know what I mean? So anyway, let's move on. By the mid-19th century, multiple powers and polities, I hope I'm saying that, vied for control of South Africa, the British at the Cape and Natal, the Boer Republic inland, and powerful African kingdoms, the Zulu, the Xhosa, the Sotho, the Tswana, etc., in various regions. The discovery of diamonds in 1867 and gold in 1866 dramatically increased European interest in the interior. These mineral discoveries fueled economic growth and intensified rivalries. Britain, under colonial magnates like Cecil Rhodes, had imperial ambitions to control the mineral wealth and to unify the region under the British flag. This led to a series of wars. So now you had the Anglo-Zulu War in 1879. British forces invaded the independent Zulu kingdom. Now all of a sudden the British, they said, well, we're against slavery. But at the same time, these Zulus need to go sit down somewhere because we're trying to get to these diamonds. Desperate for despite an early Zulu victory, the British eventually defeated the Zulu, leading to the kingdom's annexation. All right. And then going on, it says the Anglo-Boer conflict. So tensions between Britain and the Boer republics escalated. The first Anglo-Boer War, 1880 to 1881, was a short conflict in which the Transvaal Boers, fiercely independent, defeated British forces and compelled Britain to recognize Transvaal's autonomy. However, after gold was discovered in Transvaal, British ambitions reignited. The pivotal Second Anglo-Boer War in 1899 to 1902 was a much larger and bitter conflict. The British Empire developed hundreds of thousands of troops against the Boer commandos. The war was marked by guerrilla tactics by the Boers and brutal scorched earth counter strategy by the British, which included the use of concentration camps for Boer civilians, where many, especially women and children, died of disease. Ultimately, the British prevailed by the Treaty of Vereniging 1902. The Boer Republic surrendered and came under British sovereignty. All right. So again, we're dealing with these tribal things going on all over the place. You got, the Bantus versus this other group, and then you got the Boers against the British and all of that. So inside, the thing I want you to understand is that inside all of cultures, I don't care what culture it is, there is this tendency to be very tribalistic. Now, for the most part, it's not really a bad thing. But you're going to see as we go on that in some cases, it's not really a good thing at all. All right. Especially when we're talking about black folks. When I say black folks, I'm using that general. OK, but there's a lot of things that you have to take in consideration when we're talking about black people across the board and tribalism. OK, so we're going to get into that. But like I said, again, we're going to continue on with this history here on South Africa and all of that. Right. All right, let's continue. So let's see. From the Union in 1910 to 1948, South Africa was governed by white minority regimes that laid the groundwork for what will become apartheid. All right. Racial segregation and inequity were codified by a series of laws. All right. One of the earliest was the Natives Act of 1913, which reserved the vast majority of land for white ownership. So this is where white people were able to acquire these large blocks of land. It was at this point. All right. So now we're filling in some blanks. We're finding out some things when it comes to how they were able to get all that land. All right. Which reserved the vast majority of land for white ownership and restricted black Africans to native reserves. About 7% of the country's land later expanded to 13% in 1936. This devastated black peasant farming and forced many Africans into wage labor on white farms or in the mines. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, additional laws entrenched a color bar in labor, reserving skilled jobs for whites and segregated public facilities. Sounds familiar, right? Blacks were denied the vote in all provinces except a very limited number of black and colored voters in the Cape, who would also eventually lose franchise by 1936. All of this now is starting to sound familiar, isn't it? All right. The white population itself was politically split between the descendants of the British and the Afrikaners, or the Boers. Afrikaners nationalism grew strongly in the 1930s and 1940s, fueled by culture. Let me back up because I want to make sure we get that. The white population itself was politically split between the descendants of the British. Okay, so you had the British. Remember we talked about earlier, the British came and they represent their group, their tribe, right? And the Afrikaners or the Boers. Those were the Afrikaners or the Boers. Remember, these were like Dutch descendants. These are Dutch, I think some French mixed in there as well. People that came first. They were the first Europeans that landed in that area. Well, no, back up. It was the Portuguese, and then after the Portuguese, they came. All right, so that's how that worked. All right, during World War II, South Africa, led by John Smuts, fought with the Allies, but a pro-Nazi sympathizer movement, I'm not even going to try to say that, the Aswa Brandwag, had significant Afrikaner support. All right, so the Afrikaners, so the Nazis, the pro-Nazis and the Afrikaners, they had a common thread with each other. Now, what's interesting here, since we're getting into history here, later on, much later, as we get into I want to say the 60s, late 50s and 60s, guess who else was aligning themselves with the Afrikaners? Israel. And even to this day, Israel still has a strong alignment with the Afrikaners, the Boers. Okay. So, in fact, much of the equipment and the weaponry that was used during apartheid South Africa, guess who was supplying that and some of the training? Yeah, Israel was helping these people out. All right. After World War II, in 1948, the Afrikaner-based National Party narrowly won the general election on a platform appealing to Afrikaner fears and interests. The NP leaders, and they name them here, others formalized and extended segregation into the system known as apartheid, meaning apartness in Afrikaans. Did y'all know that? So that's when we hear apartheid, the word means apartness. It means you stay over there. That was their Jim Crow. Okay, under apartheid, which officially began in 1948, the country's inhabitants were classified into racial groups: white, black, African, colored, mixed race, and Indian Asian, with differential rights and privileges. We could skip that because we kind of know what that whole period was about, as far as like what apartheid, what it was about, right? Now, during this time, and I want to mention this as well. Let's come back to the big screen here. During this time, what we also got to know is Africa was being built up. In other words, yeah, there was a lot of war and stuff going on, but at the same time, they were building up cities like Johannesburg, Soweto, all these major centers. They were being built up. I mean, buildings, right? Roads, right? They had infrastructure, all the infrastructure and the banks and all of this stuff here. Guess who was building it? It was these Europeans. They built all of that. Okay. And that's something. It wasn't the black South Africans. Now, the black South Africans, they may have been the laborers, right? But they didn't have the blueprint to lay this stuff out. Right. And that's something that we got to understand that. So it was these Europeans that actually came and built up South Africa from what it was, which was mostly like, say prairie land, or just, a lot of just lush land and stuff. And the people just lived off of the land. You know what I mean? It went from that to, the Europeans came and bulldozed all that down and said, okay, we're going to start building up buildings, and trains and all this other stuff. So that's what the Europeans bought: electricity, power plants, hospitals, all this stuff. We're building everything. All right. So the Europeans did that. And this reason why I'm pointing that out is very important. Why I'm bringing that out. Let's go. Let's see. The more the intermixing, back up. Okay. So we talked about apartheid. Okay. Let's see. So in reality, apartheid was a system of racial domination designed to maintain white minority rule, and economic advantage. White South Africans enjoy political power, superior economic opportunities, and the lion's share of the land, while black South Africans were systematically deprived of rights, forced into low-wage labor, and confined to impoverished areas. So, so this is why you have such a heavy concentration of black South Africans that live in places like Johannesburg or some of these other, they pushed a lot of them in these, in these smaller areas. So that's one of the reasons why these whites were able to hold on to their large plots of land, because during apartheid, they pushed all of these black folks into these smaller areas. So when we ask, okay, well, why is it that these black South Africans, why are they not really excelling when it comes to farming? Why are we not seeing a lot more of that? Well, part of the reason, again, if you are being pushed and, you pretty much have been in the city environment or in an environment with little bit of land, it's kind of hard to do that. You know what I'm saying? To a measure, right? But again, that's a partial answer I gave you. As we go on, when the tables turned, we're going to look at that. Okay. So that's important. All right. But I wanted to highlight that. Okay. Tribalism as an Achilles heel of black South African progress. Another internal challenge that emerged during and after the anti-apartheid struggle was a persistence of tribalism. Now, this part of the conversation, we're going to it's going to start turning a little bit. Okay. It's going to start angling. Now we're going to start finding out a little bit more things. All right. Anti-apartheid struggle was the persistence of tribalism, tribal affiliations, and ethnic loyalties, originally a reflection of the country's diverse pre-colonial culture, have at times undermined broader national unity and progress. Some examples include fragmentation within the liberation movements. While the African National Congress sought to unite all Black South Africans, internal divisions along ethnic lines sometimes hampered collective action. Rivalries between groups, for instance, differences between the Xhosa-dominated leadership and other Bantu-speaking groups occasionally led to disputes over resources, allocations, and representation. Such tensions contributed to splits, including the formation of the Pan-Africanist Congress, which critiqued the ANC's perceived accommodation of colonial structures. This division sometimes reduced the overall effectiveness of the liberation struggle. So the thing that we got to understand is this, is that there was these movements that believe that they can just rope in all of these Black folks, because see, what happened was when these white people came, when the Europeans came in, they just said, okay, we know that, this area is very diverse. You got all of these different tribes and stuff, and they got their own cultures and all of that, right? But when the Europeans came, they said, no, we're going to bump all of that. We're developing a system where we're going to start putting people in these boxes, right? So we're going to say, all right, we're not going to have a box for the Zulu. We're not going to have a box for the Xhosa, right? We're not going to have a box for the San. What we're going to do now is we're going to just say, if you Black, you Black. If you white, you white. If you're colored, you're colored, right? And that's the boxes they created. So what they did was they created these mindsets into these people. They reprogrammed these people into these new tribes, right? So you got the Black tribe. Then you got the colored tribe. And then, of course, you got the white tribe, right? So they had these people now thinking away from their original culture. And now they said, we're going to force you. And now we're going to create a new culture. And we're just going to call it Black. But inside this Black culture, you have all these different cultures, right? But these cultures have a history of, at times, not liking each other. Right? They have a history, as we talked about earlier, of fighting against each other. So now you got Black folks, you know what I'm saying, within the same group, even in this new category, who already are fighting each other and at times hate each other. But where does that come from? That comes from the fact that they were reclassified as just Black. Okay? You follow me? All right, let's go. This is the danger of what happens when they just throw everybody in the same boat, All right, let's go. Fragmentation within okay, we read that. Post-apartheid political fragmentation. After 1994, as the ANC assumed national leadership, local politics often reverted to tribal allegiances. In some regions, tribal loyalties influence voting patterns, access to local government positions, and even in the distribution of developmental resources. For example, in the Eastern Cape, intense rivalries between competing Xhosa factions have at times led to nepotism and localized violence that impeded broader social economic development. Such intra-ethnic conflicts complicate efforts to create a cohesive national policy, as tribal interests can sometimes override broader national unity and reform efforts. So again, when we look at South Africa, and when you're looking at the news a lot of times, and then you got the ANC leader up there, or the EFF or whatever, they're up there, talking about, Black South Africans, we're one group. That's him saying that. But when you start digging into the facts, Black folks ain't all on the same page in South Africa. And the reason why is because that's, as we just described, there's a long history as to why they weren't on the same page. But they try to make it, but by the time it gets here in the West, We just assume that all black South Africans are on the same page, but they're not, according to this. They're not according to history. All right. The other thing I want to mention too, I forgot to mention, one of the tactics that I'm going back some. One of the tactics when the British came is that they were giving out guns to some of these tribes, because they sat back and said, well, wait a minute. We noticed that these tribes, you know, they hate. We noticed these black skinned people hate each other more than they hate us. So I think we could step in and let's help them out. So they would give certain tribes guns and say, go at it. Well, this is a tactic that Europeans have done this all over. No matter where you can go all over the world, you'll find this. They sit back and they watch and see, okay, these people hate each other more than they hate us. Let's put some guns into the equation and let them have it. And then, once they are weakened enough, then we can step in and take over the whole thing. All right. Anyway, let's move on. Resistance and anti-apartheid movement, including the role of Winnie Mandela. I wanted to cover this part too, because this was important, because a lot of times, for numbers of people, when they will see Winnie, I remember Winnie Mandela up there, standing side by side with her husband. This is the faithful wife who sat there and just waited for her husband to come out of prison. And, she is like the Coretta Scott King. That's kind of how we, here in the West, how we saw that. But no, she wasn't no Coretta Scott King. All right, but we're going to find out here. All right, from the onset, apartheid met resistance from non-white South Africans. Black South Africans, in particular, refused to accept permanent subjugation. Resistance took many forms: nonviolent protests, civil disobedience, political organization, and eventually armed struggle. The main liberation movement was the African National Congress, founded in 1912 to advocate for African rights. Initially, the ANC used petitions and lobbying. After 1948, facing harsher repression, the ANC adopted more activist tactics. In the 1950s, it organized the Defiance Campaign, this is 1952, encouraging people to deliberately flout apartheid laws, such as entering whites-only areas without passes and mass protests. In 1955, a multiracial coalition of anti-apartheid groups, the Congressional Alliance, adopted the Freedom Charter, a vision of non-racial democratic South Africa. The apartheid state responded brutally, arresting leaders and banning organizations. Winnie Mandela and the post-apartheid political violence. Even with the anti-apartheid struggle, certain figures emerged whose actions remain controversial. Winnie Mandela, affectionately known as Mama Winnie, became an icon of resistance. However, her post-apartheid years were marred by allegations of inciting political violence in the Eastern Cape. Separated from Nelson Mandela during his long imprisonment and often operating in an environment of extreme repression, Winnie Mandela emerged as a fiercely independent political actor. In the turbulent late 1980s and early 1990s, her sphere of influence in the Eastern Cape was linked to instances of extrajudicial actions against alleged informers and political rivals. So anyway, I'll just let it finish out. Cases of political violence. One notorious incident was the kidnapping, and I remember this, and murder of Stompie Moketsi, a 14-year-old boy whose death became emblematic of the violent excesses that occurred within her political sphere. Although Winnie Mandela was never conclusively convicted of the acts, multiple investigations and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings indicated her complicity in an environment where militant groups operated with little restraint. Estimates vary, with some reports suggesting that dozens, and in some localities, over 100 individuals lost their lives in politically motivated killings associated with her camp. The victims were often suspected of collaborating with the apartheid security apparatus or opposing her faction's influence. So some of the things things I read, I remember, some numbers I've heard up to 500 black South Africans, other black South Africans were attacked either directly or indirectly, with Winnie Mandela kind of pulling the strings in the back. And one of the things they used to do is they call it a necklace. And this necklace thing, that's what happened to this kid, this 14-year-old kid. What they do, they'll beat you up. And then what they'll do is they'll take a tire, think of a car tire, fill it up with gasoline, light it up, and then put it around you. So you can't even escape because you got this tire around you that's on fire, full of gas, and that's it. And this is the kind of brutality they were doing to us. So this is black folks doing this to other black folks in the shadow of apartheid. So again, it was white folks that really pushed up there, but instead of going after them, they're going after each other. But now we understand the root of this, right? You took a bunch of black folks from different ethnic or different cultures, put them all under this umbrella, calling them black, and you just expect everybody just to fall into place. That's not going to happen. That wasn't going to happen. Okay. Let me see. Okay, so this goes more into apartheid and all of that. Okay, so here we go. So now we go to post-apartheid Africa, South Africa, 1994. South Africa's first free election was held in 1994. The ANC won overwhelmingly by 62% of the vote, and May the 10th, 1994, Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as the country's first black president. The democratic transition, negotiated through multi-party talks, is often hailed as a miracle for his relatively peaceful handover. Mandela and outgoing President F.W. de Klerk established a government of national unity and a new interim constitution. That was in 1993, followed by a final constitution in 1996, enshrined one of the world's most progressive Bill of Rights. Apartheid was dismantled, discriminatory laws were repealed, the homelands reabsorbed, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established to address past abuses. All right, let's see. Mandela's government prioritized national reconciliation and the expansion of basic services. Through the Reconstruction and Development Program, millions gained access to electricity, clean water, and housing. Although the ANC government delivered substantial social improvements, deep-rooted economic disparities remain. Notable early controversies, including the Serafina II affair and the arms deal scandal, which, although largely emerging as the transition's end, signaled a brewing culture of corruption. So here comes the corruption. Nelson Mandela stepped down after one term, and in 1999, Thabo Mbeki became president. Mbeki's tenure was marked by efforts to modernize the economy and a push for black economic empowerment, BEE. Remember that, okay? BEE, which saw a small black elite emerge. Okay, here we go. Here we go. This is the emergence of the black elite. Now, I want you to kind of, what would be the equivalent here in the Americas? I would say something like the boule, a boule class. That would be kind of the equivalent. All right. Despite macroeconomic gains and significant social improvements, such as expanded social grants and improved housing, Mbeki's era was also marred by grave missteps in handling the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which we're going to touch on that in a moment, and escalation of corruption. Mbeki's reluctance to rapidly deploying antiviral ARV drugs contributed to hundreds of thousands of premature deaths. The unfolding corruption scandals, most notably the arms deal and the early sign of state capture, set the stage for the turbulent Zuma years. All right, let's move on. Jacob Zuma. His presidency was from 2009 to 2018. So he brought in more corruption. Now, again, as I've always said, when you think of government corruption, never just think of it as just one person, because it takes a whole team of people to make up a government, okay, a government structure. So like in the case of South Africa, it's tens of thousands of people. In the case of here in the United States, it's hundreds of thousands. It depends on the size of the country. But it's not just one person. It takes the co-signing of many people who are all going along with it. All right, so here we go. Jacob Zuma. Following internal ANC struggles with Mbeki's ouster, Jacob Zuma was elected president in 2009. Zuma's presidency is widely regarded as the nadir of post-apartheid governance. His tenure was plagued by systemic corruption and allegations of state capture, most notoriously the influence of the Gupta family, who effectively commandeered state resources through bribes and cronyism. Notable scandals include Nkandla scandal, in which state funds were misused for lavish upgrades to Zuma's private residence, and multiple corruption cases involving parastals, I guess, like Escom and Transnet. The widespread graft resulted in deteriorating infrastructure. So this is when the infrastructure start going down. Declining investor confidence and a stagnating economy. Crime rates and public discontent soared, leading to protests and a deepening sense of disillusionment amongst many South Africans. All right, now we into Ramaphosa presidency. All right. In February 2018, under mounting pressure from both the public and its own party, Zuma resigned and Ramaphosa assumed the presidency. He pledged to root out corruption and revive the economy. Some reforms have been implemented, including initiating the Zondo Commission to probe state capture. Despite these efforts, the challenges of a high public wage bill, apparently 10% of the GDP, persistent corruption, slow land reform, and a deteriorating infrastructure continued to hamper progress. Social grants have expanded and there have been modest improvements in service delivery, but many issues such as high unemployment, inequality, and underinvestment in education and infrastructure remain unresolved. Now, this is in Black South Africa. I thought all Black people were supposed to be on the same page. But see, baked into this, again, it stems back to what I have been saying. You took all of these people who are part of different cultures, their own tribes, you put them all together and said, ta-da, we're going to call you Black. And what set in motion is this never-ending cycle of just discontentment with each other. Plus, and I was sharing this with my wife earlier, and she brought up a good point. When you put all these different people together, plus you give them one piece of bread basically and say fight over it, well, guess what's going to happen? People are going to be fighting each other to get to that piece of bread. So it was also that too. So we don't want to leave out, we're not leaving out the part of what colonialism and what the Europeans did to add fuel to this fire. But so now we got a little bit more perspective here. But at the root of this stuff is still tribalism. All right, let's go on here. Almost finished with this here. And then we're going to switch to how this relates to us here in America. All right. Economic and social outcome for Black South Africans today. Nearly 3 decades after apartheid, the condition of Black South Africans is a mixed picture of significant gains, blah, 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 so forth. All right, so we'll just highlight these real quick. Poverty and inequality. Although poverty has declined since 1994, approximately 55% of South Africans live below the national poverty line as of 2015, with the poverty heavily concentrated among Black communities. Unemployment among Black South Africans is significantly higher than for whites. As of 2023, Black unemployment hovers at 36%, compared to about 8% for whites. Crime and safety. Crime rates in South Africa remain high. Over 20,000 murders occur annually, with more than 80% of the victims being Black South Africans, particularly young men. While whites also face crime, statistically, they are far less likely to be victims. So again, who's doing all the killing of Black South Africans today? It's not white South Africans. It's black South Africans. They're doing that to each other. Well, that sounds very familiar too, doesn't it? All right, health. Let's continue. Healthcare access has improved since 1994, yet overall health outcomes remain unequal. Life expectancy among black South Africans, while improved from the nadir reached during the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, still lags behind that of whites. HIV prevalence remains high at around 19% among adults, and black communities bear a disproportionate burden of the disease despite the world's largest ARV program. And as we know, Trump just cut off, and here's how dysfunctional South Africa is. Their AIDS program, for the most part, guess who was bankrolling most of that? The United States. How are you going to be a sovereign country, but your biggest health obstacle that you're facing right now, you don't even have the money to fix it? You got to depend on another country to help you fix it. Well, you know how that's going to go. And so Trump said, forget all that. He cut all that off. All right. And so another thing to add to that when it comes to health. Now, when you dig into this a little bit more, you're going to find that there's a much higher rate of women than men that are getting HIV. We talked about this. Do I have that up here? I don't have it up here, but basically we've talked about this before. This is not the standard in places like Zimbabwe, Africa, Congo. This is not, I just want to be very clear with that. Okay. Let me see if I can pull that up, because I did pull that up. There's this thing that it is part of the culture. I'm not saying that all South Africans practice this. I want to be very clear with that. Okay. But there's this thing, as soon as I can find it here. Oh yeah, here it is. It's called dry sex. This is what it's called. As soon as I can put it back on the screen so you can see it. But when we talked about this before, I actually pulled up the study that talked about this. Research has documented the practice of dry sex in several sub-Saharan African settings, with notable examples from South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. Here are a few illustrative examples. In South Africa, studies have shown that dry sex is relatively common in certain South African communities. For instance, research in a peri-urban population found that nearly 60% of men and 46% of women reported practicing dry sex. This practice is particularly prevalent in areas such as, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, where cultural ideas about vaginal tightness are linked to notions of sexual desirability, despite the associated health risks such as increased susceptibility to HIV infections. And they also go through these other countries as well. Now, you may be asking a little bit more. You still may be a little confused about that. And some of the things that they were talking about in this study that I was reading, women in some areas, like I said, again, I'm not generalizing saying this is practice all over the place, because that's not the case, but it is a problem. They sometimes will put things in their vaginal space. They'll put things like herbs, leaves, right? They will put leaves in there. Sometimes they will put sand in there. They'll put other things in there to make it as dry as possible, so that when they have intercourse, I guess it's supposed to be more pleasurable for the man. But the problem is that HIV is a blood-borne disease, right? So it makes sense that HIV, typically, like you'll see in this country here in the United States, HIV rates tend to be higher amongst the male population, because when they get it on, how are they getting it on, right? The rear end, right? And your rear end ain't designed for that, which means what happens? There's tears that take place, which means that it makes it easier for HIV to pass through, right? Now, when we're talking about this particular practice, this dry sex thing, when you're doing that to the woman, what do you think is happening? Same thing, the tears, which causes bleeding, which makes it a lot easier for HIV to pass through. Now, there have been, studies that show that HIV can also pass through the other body liquids, right? Fluids, right? But it's HIV primarily is a bloodborne disease, right? And I'm bringing that out because it makes, once you factor that in, it makes sense. Why is it that it's so high amongst, black female South Africans? It's because of that. So this is going on. All right. So let's go in here. I'm just about finished here. I hope y'all still with me. I know this is, I'm doing some reading up in here, and I know, it may not be exciting reading, but, I hope that it's giving you a little bit more insight on what's going on. All right. I don't even have to go through this. Let me see. I'm looking at I'll just read this part here because we're at the end here of that. We're at the end of this whole thing here. Let me get this up here. Future projections, 30-year outlook for Black South Africans. Looking ahead to the year 2055, several trends will shape the future of Black South Africans. Demographics and workforce, with a projected population of 75 to 80 million by 2050 and a predominantly young Black population, South Africa faces both a potential demographic dividend and a risk of worsening unemployment. A large, well-educated workforce could drive growth, but without significant reforms in education and job creation, the gap may widen further. Economic growth and inequality under a business as usual scenario, limited growth about 1% to 2% annually, and structural unemployment may perpetuate inequality. Alternatively, basically if they make some changes, they can turn that around. And then that's it. I had a lot of resources there and all that I pulled from, but a few things, and then we're going to switch over. How does this pertain to us here as Black Americans, right? So some of the things that Black in South Africa, since they have taken over, since the days of apartheid, again, as we pointed out here, they've been going harder after other Black South Africans. And the reason why is that whole tribalism thing, as I've been talking to you about. It's all baked into this agitation between the groups. You know what I'm saying? The other thing is another example. I remember seeing this video. If I could find it, I would definitely point y'all to it. These were expats, Black expats from America that moved over there to South Africa. And they were just talking about, I just live in South Africa. Oh, it's just so nice over here. And the food is good. And don't you dare believe everything what the media is telling you about Africa and all this other stuff. And I do want to mention this because I do see videos like that a lot when I see Black folks who relocate and go to places like South Africa or Zimbabwe or whatever. Hey, do you? If you go over there and that's what you want to do, you do you. I don't care. I do hope it's a wonderful experience. I really do. But I'm talking specifically the ones that go to South Africa. A lot of times they will tell you that. But in reality, you ask them the next thing, where are you living? A lot of times they're living in an Airbnb in a very nice part of town. They're not living where all these people who are unemployed are. They ain't living in that space. You go on their social media, they're like, yeah, look at this house here. Look at all this. Yeah, look where I'm staying. Oh, look at this. Again, going back to Mr. Ron Dalton. He did this. He moved over there. Him and his family, guess where he's talking about, man, South Africa, I'm telling you, it's the promised land. And y'all need to come over here because America's crashing. Meanwhile, we over here thriving. Look at the supermarket. He took people through the supermarket, showing them everything. And look at this, and look at, we got this, and look how good it is. Look at this neighborhood, and look at the house. Oh man, I'm sitting out here, I'm chilling. See, a lot of Black people think that Africans, they're just living in huts. And I can't stand when people say that. I don't know of any Black person in this day, for real, I mean, being serious, that actually believes that all Africans live in huts. I don't know. I haven't met anyone that actually believes that. Now you'll find some that's saying some stupid, they just whatever. But no, the internet does work, and we do see a lot that all the progress is happening there. But again, going back to this gentleman I just mentioned, he's in an Airbnb. But when you live where everybody else is living, well, the story is going to be a little bit different. So this is why I'm saying you got to make sure you're getting the whole picture when you listen to these expats that go over there. A lot of times they're showing you all this stuff because they are living well on their retirement in an Airbnb or a community where, in some cases, there's whites that live in there too. But ask them to move where all the other black folks are and see if it's the same story. You understand what I'm saying? But anyway, let's move on. But anyway, getting back to this video I was talking about, these expats that moved over there, one of the things they mentioned, they said, because some of them were entrepreneurs and they were like, we want to start a business. You can start a business, but South Africa has laws in place where if you are not, if you're not a citizen or you weren't born here, basically, you definitely have to have, I think it's like 30% of your employees have to be from South Africa, have to be black South Africans. 30% of your employees. That's just period. You want to talk, it's almost like a DEI, but it's all catered to black South Africans, meaning that it doesn't matter if they're qualified. That's the standard. You cannot even start your business unless you got 30% black South Africans. Now, for some of y'all, I'm kind of mixed on that because on one hand, you may say, well, that makes sense. You're going to come to our country. You can't have everyone in your factory or whatever that's from Finland somewhere. You need to hire some of our people. Now, that kind of makes sense, don't it? But the other side of it is, but what if I'm put in a position where I'm trying to find the skill set I need to have a successful company, but I'm only able to get to 15% of locals. And that is a real situation over there because why? The educational level of many black South Africans, it's lower. So if I have a high-tech company, it's going to be more challenging for me to meet that high watermark that they're asking for. I'm not saying everybody's illiterate over there. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it's going to be more challenging for people who want to come in and start businesses to find that, that brain trust that they need to have a successful business. You understand what I'm saying? So I saw some people saying, yeah, that's why Elon Musk, he can't start whatever his internet company. He can't have his thing over there because he won't hire any black folks or whatever. Well, that same law applies to black expats that I've heard firsthand that said the same thing, that they can't have a business either unless they hire folks, regardless of it's just, they got to be black South Africans. You got to do this. And so this has been a serious problem with a lot of businesses, regardless if they're black folks from America or wherever. You have a lot of people, just like in America, you got a lot of our businesses are started by people who weren't born here, right? And that's what contributes to overall growth. You know what I mean? They're citizens, but they start business. You have a significant portion of people who entrepreneurs here who moved to this country. They became citizens. They started businesses and they just blew up, right? And they're hiring a lot of locals. But anyway, so but South Africa, again, you're dealing with some other situation. You're dealing with a whole situation there. Anyway, let's move on. So I talked about that. I want to make sure I covered everything on that. South Africa. And then we got, of course, what we mentioned just now, talking about how this is impacting, let's say, their grid, their power grid. They're doing this thing called load shedding. I know many of you, what that basically means is that the infrastructure for their power grid, it's not strong enough. It's just everything is going down. When these people took over, when black South Africans took over, remember I said earlier, I said, who was it that built up the infrastructure? It was white. It was the Europeans. They built the infrastructure. But then what happened is these black South Africans, once they took over, the mindset, now we're transitioning to the last part of this broadcast. The mindset was abracadabra, we're going to take over. And now instead of seeing white faces in high places, now you're going to see black faces in high places. But the problem is that the black faces in high places, they didn't have this, in many cases, they didn't have the skill set to maintain and to move forward, to move that country forward economically, when it comes to technology, when it comes to all of these things. They didn't have that. So instead of focusing on that and trying to get the schools up to par so that they can do that, what began to happen? They started turning on each other, and they fighting, all this infighting and all this other stuff that's going on. It's 2025 and you telling me y'all still can't keep the power on? I'm just saying. And then as far as land is concerned, I had another report here too. I'm just, like I said, I'm just going, as far as land is concerned, did you know that the black African, South African government, they own many thousands upon thousands of acres of land? It's not just the white people that own land. The black South African government owns a lot of land. But what are they doing to it? In many cases, they're just holding on to it. So they're hoarding this land that they could just release to the people right now, but they just kind of tear it off little by little. I wish I could bring that up here. The amount of corruption that's going on, there's a whole list of things that I can point out. The amount of taxes, I think I showed that on the community page. The amount of taxes they put on people, most of the employment of black South Africans is what they call civil service, and it will be the equivalent of federal government. Most of the millionaires in South Africa work for the federal government or the civil service. That's where your millionaires, you want to know where the millionaires work? They work for the government. So all of this money that they're collecting from all these fees and taxes and all this stuff is going back to black folks in government who have proven that they can't keep the schools up. They can't feed the people. I forgot the rate. It was like 1,400 children a year in South Africa die of starvation. That makes no sense. You were literally handed an infrastructure. You didn't build on it. See, here's my thing. And so as I'm kind of, like I said, again, let me transition and we're going to get to America now. Here's my thing. Going back to what we talked about earlier in this broadcast, knowing what we know as far as the Europeans and how they came over there and what they did and what they set in motion and all of that. Are black South Africans, are they right into being very angry and frustrated with white South Africans? Absolutely. I've said and I'll continue to say, if I had a Thanos glove, I would have all the white people that have moved over there, they need to go back to their land. Because as white people are the same ones that will tell us to go back to Africa, okay, that's fine. Then you need to go back to Europe. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. Y'all need to work that out. I know you're fleeing oppression, but you need to go back and you need to work that out. Just like you tell us, right? And what these people did, what they set in motion, the apartheid system, which we learned tonight, it means apartness, right? In Afrikaans. What they set in motion, Yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. But what happened was when these black South Africans took over, the first notion in their minds was, let's repeat the same, let's get back at them. What they did to us, let's do the same thing to them. And they were so focused on getting retribution, but the progression of the society, it took a back seat. So now we're in 2025, and the hottest topic right now isn't we got some engineers, we're building up the infrastructure right now so that the power can always be on and we'll never have this issue again. Poverty is going to be gone. We're building up the schools. No. They ain't talking about that. You know what they're talking about right now? We're going to get after these. They still trying to get after these white people. I can't stand these white people. That's your top priority. That's your top priority. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so what I'm saying is the question we have to ask is this approach working? Is this approach of constant retribution, has it moved black South African society forward? Has it moved forward? Has the educational level go up? Technology, has it gone up? Infrastructure, has it gone up? Or is it just you have literally caved in and just eaten each other alive? So clearly it's not working, is what my point is. It's not working. So now let's jump over to here in America. Well, it's the same thing. We have tribalism here as well. Now, here's another ingredient that we need to add when we're talking about black Americans. See, a lot of these people we're talking about in South Africa, what tribe are you from? Well, I'm from the Zulus. I'm from this or whatever. They can walk down the street and be in their tribe that's been in existence for like thousands of years, right? Well, us as black Americans, not so much, right? In fact, when you do a readout of our DNA, you're going to find a mixture of all kinds of stuff in our DNA. We're a mixture of all of them. So go back and rewind again. Here in South Africa, they took these different cultures, mushed them together and said, we're going to call you black. For us here in the Americas, we are a conglomeration of all of these different cultures coming together. You know, you got some Nigerian in you, you got some of this in you, you got some of that in you, you got this in you, you got that in you, you got this. We got all that mixed up, right? And then on top of that, we had the oppression, that similar oppression that was put on them. And they gave us that one piece of bread and said, okay, you fight on that. So we're mixed up on top of mixed up. Okay. So, and we're separated from the land. We don't have any land that we can put our foot on and say, this is ours. You understand what I'm saying? So we're at a whole nother level when it comes to this whole situation. All right. So let's move on. And so what did we do? But instinctively, as human beings, we resorted to what? The same thing that they resorted to, and that was tribalism. And what are some of the forms of tribalism that we see today? Well, some of the forms of tribalism we see, let's look at religion, for example. You got the AME church, you got the Kojics, you got the Baptists, and etc. Religion brings its own form of tribalism, right? One denomination is better than the other denomination, right? And then let's look at stuff like street gangs, for example. Same thing. Street gangs is a form of tribalism. You got the East Coast versus the West Coast and this versus that group and all of that, right? So you got tribalism when it comes to that, right? And then now you got the recent, well, I would say recent, it kind of, recent, I would say in the last 100+ years, right? I'll say 100 years. In recent identities now, we got, well, I'm native born. I'm foundational to this land here. I don't know nothing about Africa. I ain't had nothing to do with Africa. Ain't nothing African about me. That's it. So you got that group. They're saying, okay, we are our own tribe. Then you got black folks who claim to be Hebrew Israelites. They are the tribe of Judah. They're Hebrews, right? They're their own group. Then you got those that who are Muslim, you know, the 5%ers or whatever. They, you know, they are the Nation of Islam. So they are in their own tribe. Then you got the Moors. Then, of course, you got fraternities and sororities. They are all in their own tribes. So we have to ask ourselves, all of these different tribes that we have created, because as I said again, it's instinctive. Tribalism is instinctive in all groups. But what we have to ask ourselves is this, as Black folks, is what exactly has our tribalism built? That's what we have to ask ourselves. What has it tangibly built? We have to ask ourselves that. Now, it's not enough for you to just say, well, we just built America. Well, a lot of people built America. We got to be honest with it. Let's be totally honest with this. We took part in building this. But as far as the design and the blueprint of what we call today America, we took part in that. We didn't sit up. We weren't in the blueprint room and designing all this out. Okay, this is how the banks are going to work. Okay, when we build these buildings, we're going to build it out of this material. Okay, when we build this technology, we're going to do this or whatever. No. We took part. And then once the designers, the engineers got together and they designed all that stuff, they said, okay, who we going to get to do the manual labor? All right, I know. Let's get this group. That's where we came in. You understand what I'm saying? So let's get that right and let's get that together. You understand? Were we an integral part? Yes, absolutely. But we didn't design this thing. Because if we designed the system, we wouldn't be talking about inequality or anything, right? Why would you design a system of inequality against yourself? So no, I'm not taking any credit for building this system. Okay? So anyway, so what happened? So anyway, when I say Black, okay, so, but when we look at tribalism, all these different groups that I just mentioned, can we honestly say that we have tangibly built something that has not only lasted, but has moved what is called today Black people, has moved us forward and into the future successfully? Can we honestly say that? Well, let's look at, all you got to do is look no further than your local politician, your local mayors, and look at these different cities and towns where we have taken control. We've taken over, right? You got Black folks who are mayors, Black folks who are city council members and all of that. Let's look at the Black folks that we have in these schools and all of that. Have those schools greatly improved where the educational level is at an all-time high? Where we got more engineers, now we got more scientists, now we got more doctors. Has it improved? Have we gotten to a point where we don't even need their system? Because we moved up so far, we built our own system. Now, there's been pockets of areas where we've done some of it. And we can, to a certain extent, we can say, well, we've tried it, but, white supremacy shot it down and all of that. Yes, that has happened, but it's not stopping us today. It is certainly not stopping us today. What I'm saying is we have to take an honest look at our culture and see exactly what is some of the things that are missing. The example I was just using recently with someone, I said, all you got to do is look at TikTok. When you look at TikTok, they have a whole section because people were getting mad. They were saying, we're tired of TikTok. They're dumbing down our children, with all this foolishness and craziness and stuff like that. Y'all need to do something. So TikTok, so they're getting mad at TikTok, but they're at the platform, but not getting mad at the people who putting the dumb stuff on there. So what is TikTok, Chinese owned? What did they do? They said, okay, well, let's bring in some of our own culture. We're into science and math and all of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a STEM section. You can go on TikTok right now and look at it. It's a whole section called STEM. That's science, engineering, technology, that kind of thing, right? Mathematics. So when you scroll on the STEM section, you'll see everybody that's talking about science, engineer, technology, that kind of thing. But when you scroll through it, you can count probably on one hand the amount of black Americans that are really on it. That's not to say black Americans aren't in that field. I'm not saying it. But when you look at the numbers, we are anemic when it comes to that area. The very things that move a culture or a group forward, we're anemic in. You desperately need scientists and engineers. These are the people that design things and move people forward, that move society forward. It's not the dancers. It's not the hip hop artists. It's not the cooks. They all have their place. But if you have this huge group of people and you got this tiny bit of scientists and designers and engineers, that group ain't going to move but so far. Do you understand what I'm saying? You got to have your scientists. You got to have your engineers. That's a must. And when we look at, like I said, going back to the TikTok example, I'm scrolling through there. You know who I see? I see a lot of Asians and I see a lot of white folks. And every now and then I see some black folks. But most of it is the Asians and the whites and then some other groups. And you know what they're talking about? You know, when you're on TikTok and they have like I don't know what they call them, like town hall thing, you know, where people, it's like 5 or 6 people on there and they all talking about something. You know what they're talking about in their like group chat thing? It was funny. I'm scrolling through it and they were like, okay, so today what we're going to talk about is, man, how do we break down this? How do you understand algebra or trigonometry? And okay, today's problem is this. Let's see how many ways we can figure this out. And they just all taking part in trying to understand this mathematical problem and how to break it down. Now, when I go back to the other side of TikTok, the main street of TikTok, you know what they're doing with that same space? They arguing about, are the Egyptians really black? They arguing about, you know, what's the skin color or what the scripture says. It says this, arguing about over scriptures. Arguing about, you know, just the dumb stuff. The big woman that, you know, couldn't get a ride in the Uber. That's a big thing. Black men versus white men. I mean, black women versus black men. That is the issue. Those are the top topics that's discussed. And then move along to black media. I touched on this before in the last broadcast when we talk about black media. Black media, when we look at black media, what is black media's focus on? I don't care if it's old black media or if it's new black media. The main focus of black media is what are white people doing. That's the main focus. I don't care if you're looking at white media. I don't care if you're looking at new media, new black media or old black media. The main focus seems to center around what are white people doing and their actions and their moves. That's the main move. That's the main discussion. But when it comes to talking about things such as, you know, when we talking about the jab, for example, you know, and the impact of that, what is scientifically and medically happening when you get that thing injected in you? What happens? How many black platforms, new black media or old black media, have you come across that have really have broken down what's in that jab and what happens to your body? I mean, come on, seriously. How many platforms? There are some, but the most of them didn't even touch it. Oh, that's too much. You know, you got the some that says take it, and then the other one's like no, leave it alone. But don't you realize we need to know what's being put in our body? You understand what I'm saying? Or what about when we're talking about geoengineering? How many new black media or old black media are actually talking about the stuff that they're spraying, pointing to the sky and saying, hey, black folks, we need to talk about this, what they're doing up in the sky. Let's break this down. Let's talk about that. Or let's talk about the impact of Wi-Fi on your cells. Or let's talk about the impact of they're not talking about, they don't talk about that. Everything is centered on an offense, what we don't like, fun and games and entertainment. There is a portion, yes, that does talk about some more serious matters. But the overwhelming focus is basically on what Mr. Charlie doing. You see what they doing? Oh, that Trump. Oh, that Elon. It's just focused on that. But it doesn't move you forward. You're not going to ever move forward if you're always paying attention to them. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's why most of what you get on social media if it's black oriented, it's focused on that. It's always focused on looking next to you, looking behind you. And so I'm just going to say this, and like I said, we're winding down now. So how are we going to do this? You're going to have to start focusing on yourself. You're going to have to start focusing on your own self-development. And you're going to have to start specifically focus on your own family. See, no longer do I have this mindset that all black people are one day going to come together. And I've said this many times. I don't think that anymore. I used to. But there's no way, now that we have gone through that long account of history, there is no way, we have no example historically. I know that was a lot of reading that I went through, but I had to go through it because you have to understand historically, there is no precedent where you got black folks coming from all walks of life, just all of a sudden coming together, and we're building something that lasts, is sustainable, and is moving us forward. There's no example of that. Well, we got the Civil Rights Bill. Well, you see how that turned out. There's no example. None. We went all the way back to what? I don't know what year that was. We went years back, y'all. 14th century, 13th century. There's no example of that. There's always this built-in sense of tribalism. But what happened was, like I said, it's tribalism. You'll find that all over. But what's happened with us is that it was exasperated by colonialism or racism or whatever. But either way, it was still there. You still can make choices to right the ship. You still can do that. You don't have to forever go through, oh, the white man. You don't have to do that. There are exits. There are off ramps that you can take now where you can begin to start focusing on you, building yourself up. Focusing on your family, building them up, where you no longer think in terms of tribal, because tribal ain't going to move. It's not going to get you where you need to go. It's not. Tribal is limiting. Let me say that again. Thinking tribal is limiting. Now, I will always love black folks. Okay, I love my culture. I've been focused for a long time on the highlights of our culture, going back to the continent. I have a whole podcast I did. I got to re-upload it, but a whole podcast series I did where we focus on ancient technology of people throughout the continent. The mathematics and sciences and all that stuff. We did a whole series on that. So I'm not saying abandon that. But I'm going to say something right now it's probably going to throw some of you off. I'm going to say this, and I want you, but either you're going to hear it or you're going to get offended. But what I'm saying is this, given the history lesson that we just went through just now, you can, if you want to move forward, you can no longer categorize yourself as black. You can't. You understand what I'm saying? You can't do it because the black categorization that was established in this system was designed to keep you limited and keep you controlled and keep you on one lane, and that's the slow lane. That's what it was designed to do. And as long as you stay in that lane, you'll never advance. You'll never grow. You're going to always stay looking over on the other side. What's the white car doing? Or what the Asian car, what they doing? Man, I ain't doing nothing. Shoot, you're just going to always stay there and stay status quo. But you know, what I've been focused on, I said, you know what? I told y'all, I said, listen, I ain't slowing down no more. I ain't slowing down for folks no more. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm done. So you know what I'm doing now? Like you saw yesterday, I said, I'm start doing some books now. Now I got the ability to put my ideas together and get it out quick. I'm going to start putting some books out. I got a whole list of things already I'm going to start doing. You know what I did? I went on ChatGPT before I got on here. I went on ChatGPT and I said, there is something that I want to, I know about it, but when it comes to math, I've always been intimidated by math. I've always been intimidated because I didn't have great teachers of math when I was in high school. When I got to technical school, however, once I saw how it was applied, then I started catching on. I started getting it. I could have gone even further, but I didn't, for the program I was in, I didn't really need to go further in it. But I now started to understand how mathematics and how it works and all of that. You know what I mean? But here I am, 54 years old. And I said, you know what? Getting into AI and doing all this stuff I'm doing with AI right now, I keep hearing about, I've been hearing this for a long time, quantum physics, right? And, because a lot of the systems and stuff that they're using for all these AI, just running AI right now, they're using quantum physics. And so I said, you know what? I want to learn about quantum physics. So you know what I did? I did this literally right before I got on here. I went on ChatGPT and I explained, this is my background. This is how much math I know. This is how much math I feel very comfortable at this level, but I'm not like some math whiz. Now, what I want you to do, I'm walking you through what I did. So I said, what I want you to do, I'm telling you what you are. You are a high school math teacher. And what I want you to do is, taking into account my background, I want you to develop for me a 2-week program that I can, is only 10 minutes a day, where you are teaching me the basics of quantum physics, just the basics. That's what I want you to do. And, just make sure you're covering the basics. Make sure you use as many practical everyday examples as possible, because that's how I learn. And you know what the thing came back and said to me? Well, we can't do that because you're going to need to get a loan. You can't do that because, it's too many white people. And what the white people are saying, you trying to be white? You sounding white. No, it didn't say that. It came back and said to me, it said, well, I don't know. You kind of old, 54 years old. You trying to learn quantum physics. When you try, no, it didn't say any of that. You know what it said? Okay, when you want to get started. I got it. When you want to get started. It repeated back to everything I said. It says, okay, all right. So again, you want me to do this. You want to teach. You want me to do this. What time of the day you would like for us to meet up? Because I already got all the lessons lined up. What time you want to get up? So I was like, okay, let's go. So I said, let's meet up. He says, okay, so we're going to do it 10 minutes a day, and we're going to do it for 2 weeks. That's it. This is how easy now it is to move forward and move ahead. See, but if I was still in the tribal mindset, I wouldn't be talking about no quantum physics. I wouldn't be talking about that. I'd be talking about why they got this person on this show and why they report. I ain't got time for all of that. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about Jamal Bryant. You heard what Jamal Bryant said the other day? Man, let's just talk about it. Oh, Jamal Bryant this and Jamal Bryant that. Let's talk about what's her name? Jasmine Crockett. Let's just talk about her. Let's just talk about all the stuff she's doing, all the crazy stuff. Ain't she crazy? You see all that stuff? You see what these crazy people are doing? I ain't talking. That's why I said at a certain point, I'm like, okay, I'm done. So I can't focus on that. Now I got to focus on building, moving forward. You understand what I'm saying? This is what I'm talking about. And I cannot align myself with the foolishness. I can't. I can't align myself with the tribalism stuff because the tribalism stuff has historically has shown itself not to be the vehicle for anybody if you're trying to move ahead. It's not. Now you may say, the last thing you may say, well, white people, you mentioned that, white people, they also have been engaged in tribalism, but it seemed like they figured it out. Yeah, but white people didn't have to go through some of the extra things that really pushed us where we are right now. And it's just what we're dealing with right now. It is due to, that's why I say you can't cancel out colonialism. You cannot cancel out what slavery did. You can't cancel that stuff out. That's what got us where we are now. You understand, when it comes to this tribalism, because we all mix up and we're all fighting some of this stuff. If I even went even further, I would say, I think to a certain extent, this is just my own opinion. I think tribalism is really innate, meaning that you may have based on your genetic makeup, you may have a proclivity where you don't get along with, you always wonder why you don't get along with certain black people. It may be because genetically, y'all don't, if you were to do a genetic match, you'll say, yeah, historically, these groups never got together anyway. You know, that may have a part in it. I don't know. It's something to explore. Don't know. But what I am saying is, no, we cannot move forward as a tribe. When I was in the Hebrew Israelites, you got Hebrew Israelites that fight one another. We the tribe of Judah, but they'd be the first ones to try to take each other out. All you got to do is go on YouTube. You see them, they're doing videos. They calling each other out all the time, all kind of names, sending each other to hell, accusing people of this, that, or whatever. So that tribe don't work. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't. So this is the era right now where you got to start thinking individually, and your family. And as you are working on you and as you're working on your family, right? You're going to, over time, you will begin to connect with like-minded people. Some of those people are going to look like you. Other people will not. You understand what I'm saying? Some people may call you a nerd or this or that or whatever. Other people, whatever, it don't matter. So I'm calling out and I'm encouraging you. I'm encouraging you, if you got in you that, hey, I've been wanting to work on a book for a long time, this is the time to do it. If you want to start learning a different language, this is the time to do it. If you want to start learning whatever it is out here, programming or whatever it is, it ain't coach, you on here, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, there's not even, there ain't no excuse now. There's literally no excuse now. So I'm not waiting for, okay, we're going to do a black collective and we're going to go. I mean, okay, you want to do that, that's fine. The other thing I brought out too, when we was in Atlanta, it's a wonderful black gentleman who, he had like a math summer camp. And it was a math summer camp. He would target black children. Like he would try to get black kids, but it was open to whomever, right? Man, just awesome. Anybody that does that, I'm with you. You know what I mean? I'm just like, you know what I mean? That's great. But here's the problem. Unfortunately, once those kids left out, they re-entered into a culture that really didn't embrace math like that. So what they learned as soon as they got out there, they were just like, that's it. So and the existing culture isn't one that embraces that. And if you want to be, I'm going to start changing the culture. Okay, well, you're going to spend a whole lifetime and then some trying to do that, and you will fail. Because not everybody in the culture, in the tribe, ain't riding with that. It just isn't. And it's been proven. So that's why you got to focus on yourself and other people who see that when the time is right. They'll latch on, or you'll latch on to them, and then y'all go and do even greater things. And that's how it should be. Okay? So it's really something. Like I said, again, this is a long one. I didn't think it was going to be this long, but it is a long one. And like I said, the notes that I was reading earlier, give it to me the latest Tuesday. I'll put it in a PDF. I'll make that free for you. And you can download that and look at it on your own and read about that. But South Africa really helps us to understand why it is it seems like black folks just don't get along at times. And I think that does help us a lot, in understanding a little bit better. So anyway, that is it. That is all I have for you. Thank you again so much, all of y'all who joined this evening. Maybe you joined late or whatever. I'll try to chapter this out. I'm trying to figure out how to do it. Anyway, you guys take care. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening, or whenever it is that you're watching this. And I'll be talking to you again soon. Take care now. I'll see you.